Hey guys, tonight we are traveling back to a place that's both famous and famously misunderstood, ancient Sparta. Now when you think of Sparta, you probably picture chiseled warriors in bronze helmets, shouting "This is Sparta," before kicking someone into a well. And while there was definitely a lot of shouting and intense physical fitness, the reality of everyday life was far stranger, colder, and frankly, a lot more bureaucratic than Hollywood would have you believe. It was a society that took the idea of "it takes a village to raise a child" and turned it into a chilling state-run program. You probably wouldn't have survived the first day. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And for our little blitzing me, know what city you're listening from and what time it is for you. It's always cool to see where in the world our little community is tuning in from. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. The first thing you experience isn't the warm embrace of your mother. It's the cold, indifferent air of the Laconian Valley. You've just entered the world, and there is no celebration, no cooing, no gentle swaddling in a soft blanket. Instead, there's a quiet, tense sufficiency. Your first moments of life are not about bonding, they're about passing your first and most critical test. You are property of the state, and the state needs to inspect its new asset. Your father, a man you will barely know for the next 30 years, takes you. He doesn't look at you with the swelling pride you might see on a modern father's face. He looks at you with a critical eye, searching for flaws. He wraps you in a simple cloth and carries you out of the home. The journey isn't long. He takes you to a place called the Lesche, a sort of public clubhouse, or portico where the elders of your tribe gather. Imagine this scene. You're a newborn, your eyes barely able to focus, and you are brought before a council of old men. These aren't just any grandfathers. These are the Jeris IA. They are all over 60, veterans of countless battles, their faces like maps of hardship, etched with scars and the deep lines of a life lived without comfort. They sit in judgment, their gaze methodical and unnervingly impersonal. They are the quality control inspectors of Sparta's production line of warriors. One of them takes you. His hands are calloused and rough against your soft skin. He turns you over, examining your limbs, your spine, the shape of your head. Is every finger and toe present and correct? Is your body well proportioned to you? Do you cry with a strong, healthy wail, or is it a feeble whimper? They are looking for any sign of sickness, deformity, or weakness. This is the primary, mainstream historical fact. Mainstream historical fact: we know about your birth you are subject to state-sanctioned inspection. If you are deemed imperfect, your story ends here. You would be left to perish from exposure in a chasm at the foot of Mount Agoge, a place they called the APO, the day or the deposits. Now for a stranger, more specific detail. The ancient writer Plutarch, who lived centuries after Sparta's peak, but had access to older sources, adds a buzzer twist to this inspection. He claims that the elders didn't just look at you, they tested you by giving you a bath and wine. The theory, as absurd as it sounds to us, was that pure, unmixed wine would cause epileptic fits or convulsions in a weak or sickly infant, while a strong, healthy baby would temper in the liquid and emergent harm. It was a pass-fail test of the most brutal kind, a primitive form of genetic screening. Imagine that your first bath is a boozy trial by fire. Modern science, of course, would call this a terrible, terrible idea. But here's where the story gets more complex, and it's a point historians are still fiercely debating. Was this practice of infant exposure a common, systematic culling that happened every single day, or was it a more rare, perhaps ritualistic event, exaggerated over time to enhance Sparta's fearsome reputation for centuries? Everyone took the story of a pit filled with baby skeletons at face value. Modern archaeological excavations of the supposed pit have found that the remains there are overwhelmingly those of adolescents and adult men, likely criminals, traitors, or prisoners of war. There's a conspicuous lack of infant bones. So, was Plutarch relaying a myth? Was it propaganda created by Sparta's enemies, like the Athenians, to paint them as monsters, or was the practice real, but just not as widespread as the legend suggests? The truth is, we don't know for sure. The academic world is still arguing about the scale of it all. For you, in this moment, the debate is irrelevant. All that matters is the verdict of the old men. There's a silent pause. They look at each other. A slow odd passes between them. You are strong. You are perfectly formed. You have passed. There is no applause, no smiles. There is only a quiet, grim approval. You are deemed worthy of the investment, worthy of the food, the training, and the life of hardship that awaits. You are handed back to your father, who carries you back to the woman who gave birth to you. You have been approved. Your life as a Spartan has officially begun. But don't get too comfortable. This was the easy part. You are carried back home, but the word home doesn't quite fit the feeling. It's not a sanctuary of warmth and comfort. It is, for now, a holding area. You are placed in the care of your mother, a woman who sees you not as her precious child, but as her sacred duty to the state. Her love, if you can call it that, is expressed not through kisses and cuddles, but through a rigorous, unyielding program of toughening you up. She is your first drill sergeant. Her hands are firm as she cares for you. There is no gentle swaddling here. The common practice of wrapping infants tightly to keep them calm and secure is forbidden in Sparta. Your limbs must be left free, unrestricted, so they can grow strong and straight. You are bathed daily, but not always in warm water. Cold water tempers the body, she believes. You are fed a simple, plain diet with no fussing. You will learn to eat what you are given, without complaint. When you cry, you are met with silence. Your wails echo in the small, austere room, but no one rushes to comfort you. There are no lullabies, no soothing words, no rocking you to sleep. Crying is a weakness, a form of self-indulgence, and it will be trained out of you. You quickly learn the first lesson of Spartan life: self-reliance. Your needs will not be met with soft sympathy. You must endure. This sounds incredibly harsh to our modern ears, a direct recipe for a host of psychological issues, but for the Spartans, it was the foundational pillar of character. This brings us to a rather peculiar little fact about Spartan child rearing. Their methods were so famous in the ancient world that Spartan women were highly sought after as nannies by wealthy families in other Greek city-states. It was like a premium, old-world child care service. Plutarch notes that these nannies were prized for their ability to raise children who were not picky eaters, not afraid of the dark, and not prone to tantrums or whining. They would purposefully leave children alone in dim rooms to build a tolerance for solitude and darkness. So while the rest of Greece was raising its children with varying degrees of affection, the Spartan method was a known, marketable skill, a brand built on creating emotionally resilient, low-maintenance kids. You are the product of this very brand. Your mother's job is to ensure you don't become soft. She speaks to you in short, direct sentences. Her praise is rare and hard-won. She is preparing you for the inevitable separation that looms just a few years away. She knows you do not truly belong to her, you belong to her, you belong to Sparta. Her ultimate value as a woman in this society is measured by her ability to produce and raise a son who will become a formidable warrior. The famous line attributed to Spartan mothers speaks volumes when handing her son his shield before he leaves for battle. She would say, "Return with it," or "On it." Victory or a noble death were the only acceptable outcomes. There was no room for a third option. But this is where a fascinating historical debate arises. Were Spartan women truly this devoid of sentiment? Were they the cold, unfeeling baby-making machines that writers like Plutarch and living hundreds of years later in a Roman world portrayed them to be? Or is this an oversimplification, a caricature created by outsiders who were both fascinated and horrified by Spartan culture? The truth is, our entire picture of Spartan women comes from non-Spartan, male authors. We have no diaries, no letters, no personal accounts written by the women themselves. All we have is the external perception. It's entirely possible that this stoic, hardcore persona was a public mask, a role they were expected to play. Perhaps in the quiet moments, away from the prying eyes of the state and society, a mother still felt a pang of sorrow for the son she would have to give up. Maybe she shed a private tear for a child who didn't pass the inspection at the Les Chase. Some historians argue that to assume they felt nothing is to deny their basic humanity. They point to figures like Gorgo, the wife of King Leonidas, who was famous for her intelligence and sharp political wit. She was clearly no simple automaton. So, was the iron-willed Spartan mother a complete reality, or a carefully maintained performance? We are left to wonder about the silent, unrecorded emotional lives of these women. For now, you know only the performance. You grow from an infant into a toddler. You can walk, you can run, you speak in the clipped, concise Laconian dialect you hear around you. You have been trained not to fear the dark, not to cry when you fall. You are strong, you are healthy. And you are almost 7. You are almost 7. Your preliminary training is complete, but the state is always watching, and soon it will be time. Your mother has done her job. The real system is about to take over. The years between 4 and 7 are a blur of supervised freedom. You learn the landscape of your family's kale arrows, the plot of land that supports you, though you don't work it yourself. That is for others. You run. You play games with other boys, but always under the watchful eye of a society that is quietly sizing you up. And then, the day comes. It's your 7th birthday. There is no cake, no party, no gifts. Your birthday is simply a marker, a date on an administrative calendar. A man arrives at your home. HES, not a friend or a relative. He is a state official, a magistrate. His face is impassive, his mission simple. He is here to collect you. The moment is stripped of all ceremony. Your mother straightens the simple tunic you wear. She looks you in the eye, and her expression is one of stern resolve. There are no tears. A tear would be a betrayal of everything she has taught you, a sign that her work was incomplete. She might say something brief, a final piece of advice like "do not shame us." Or perhaps she says nothing at all. Silence is, after all, a Spartan virtue. You turn and walk away with the man, and you do not look back. Looking back is a weakness. You are not alone for long. As you walk, you join a small procession of other 7-year-old boys, all taken from their homes on the same day. Some look defiant, some are just numb. You are all walking towards your new life, a state-run, all-encompassing education and training system known as the agoge. This is the great machine that will forge you into a Spartan. It is the single most important institution in your society, and you are its newest raw material. This system is mandatory for every Spartan boy, with the sole exception of the heirs to the 2 royal thrones. Even they, however, often chose to participate to prove their mettle. You are laid to a communal barracks, a stark, functional building that will be your home for the next 2 decades. This is where you are formally handed over. The feeling is less first day of school and more intake at a correctional facility. You are now part of a pack. In fact, the official term for your group is an age law, which translates literally to a herd, as in a herd of animals. This isn't an accident, it's a deliberate choice of words to reinforce the idea that you are now part of a collective, not an individual. Overseeing this entire operation is a powerful magistrate called the paid-o-nomos or boy herder. His job is to ensure the agoge runs smoothly and produces the desired results. Here we encounter a strange little detail of the system. While the paid-o-nomos was the official in charge, your immediate supervisors were older boys. Young men, often in their late teens, were given whips and the authority to discipline you for any infraction at any time. The state cleverly outsourced its daily enforcement to the trainees themselves, creating a brutal hierarchy where survival depended on learning the rules and pleasing your immediate superiors. This wasn't just hazing, it was a structured part of the curriculum, designed to teach obedience and command simultaneously. You learn to take orders before you can ever hope to give them. Now, this vision of the agoge, a brutal, unchanging system that ran like clockwork for centuries, is powerful. But it's also where historians get into some serious debates. Was the agoge really a single, monolithic system laid down by a legendary lawgiver named Lycurgus, then followed without deviation for 500 years, or did it change and evolve over time? The accounts we rely on most heavily, from writers like Xenophon and Plutarch, were written when Sparta was already past its prime. They might have been describing an idealized or even fossilized version of the system. Think about it: would the agoge of 700 BC, when Sparta was still a rising power, be identical to the one in 400 BC, after the devastating Peloponnesian War had changed the Greek world forever? Historians argue that the system likely adapted to the state's needs. In early days, it might have been more focused on simple military drills. In later centuries, as Sparta's reputation grew, it might have become more ritualized, more extreme, almost a self-conscious performance of what it meant to be Spartan. The idea of a single, timeless agoge is likely a myth. The reality was probably messier and far more fluid, changing from one generation to the next. But for you, a 7-year-old boy standing at the entrance to the barracks, these academic debates mean nothing. You are at the start of the production line. The past, with its vague memories of a mother and a home, is gone. The future is an unknown landscape of hardship. You look at the faces of the other boys around you, a mix of fear and forced bravado. These are the only brothers you will have from now on. You step across the threshold, and the door to your childhood closes for good. Welcome to your new home. The barracks smells of sweat, damp earth, and wood smoke. It is loud, echoing with the shouts of older boys and the sharp crack of a whip in the distance. This is your world now. You are assigned to your age lyre herd, and within it, you find your smaller group of bunk mates. These boys are your new family. You will eat with them, sleep with them, train with them, and compete against them for the rest of your youth. The bonds you form here, forged in shared misery and rivalry, will be the most important relationships of your life, far stronger than any tie to your biological family. The first rule you learn is not spoken, it's demonstrated. A boy from another group accidentally bumps into one of your new roommates. Words are exchanged, not many, because Spartans are taught to be concise, and then fists fly. A circle forms instantly. No one intervenes. The fight is quick, brutal, and decisive. One boy is left on the ground, nursing a bloody nose. The other stands over him, breathing heavily. The winner gets a subtle nod of approval from an older boy watching from the corner. The loser is ignored, left to pick himself up. The message is clear: there is a pecking order. Strength is respected, weakness is despised. You must find your place in this hierarchy quickly. Your living conditions are designed to strip away any notion of comfort. You sleep on a reed bed that you make yourself. You are not given a mattress or even a blanket. Your instructions are to go down to the Euphrates River and break off reeds with your bare hands. No knife is permitted. The act of gathering and preparing your own bedding is part of the training. In winter, you are allowed to add thistledown to your reed bed, not because it provides much warmth, but because its soft texture is thought to be a small luxury you've earned through enduring the cold. You are issued a single cloak. Your phalanx is a coarse, crimson garment that serves as your uniform, your blanket, and your only piece of clothing for the entire year, winter and summer. It's a famous symbol of Spartan identity, but for you, it's a constant, scratchy reality. The crimson color, by the way, was chosen for a very practical reason. It was thought to be the least effeminate color, and, more importantly, it effectively hid the sight of blood, both yours and the enemy's. This prevented you from showing fear and the enemy from knowing how badly you are wounded. And now for a bizarre and slightly disgusting tidbit of daily life. Personal hygiene was minimal. Xenophon, an Athenian who admired the Spartans, noted that they were forbidden from taking frequent warm baths, Such things were considered a sign of decadence. They were encouraged to bathe in the cold, fast-flowing Eurotas river, even in the dead of winter. Furthermore, the use of oils and lotions, a common practice for skin care throughout the rest of Greece, was strictly forbidden. The idea was to have a body that was hard, dry, and weathered, not soft and perfumed. You would be perpetually grimy, your skin chapped, your body hardened by the elements. This leads us to another historical debate: how much of the filth was reality versus propaganda. Critics of Sparta, particularly the Athenians, loved to portray them as dirty, uncultured brutes. It was an easy way to draw a contrast with their own self-image as sophisticated, clean, and civilized people. Was Spartan hygiene really as bad as their rivals claimed, or was it simply different? Focused on cold water toughening rather than warm water comfort, historians today suggest the truth is likely somewhere in the middle. Spartans were certainly not engaging in the elaborate bathing rituals of Athens or Rome, but they probably weren't living in utter squalor either. The river was a central part of their lives, and regular, if bracing, bathing was part of the routine. The dirty Spartan robe may have been a convenient stereotype, exaggerated by their enemies. As you lie down on your bed of sharp reeds on that first night, the sounds of the barracks swirling around you, the reality of your new existence settles in. You are one among many. Your individual identity is already starting to fade, replaced by the collective identity of your age. While your comfort means nothing, your feelings mean nothing. Your only value lies in your potential to become a strong link in the chain. You are surrounded by rivals, who are also your brothers. You are cold, you are hungry, and you are 7 years old. The training has just begun. Sleep well if you can. Tomorrow, the real pain starts. The world before dawn is cold and gray. You are woken not by a gentle stirring, but by a sharp command from an older boy. There is no time for grogginess. You are on your feet in an instant, the cold floor a shock to your system. The first order of the day is physical training, the cornerstone of your entire existence. And the first lesson is that you will almost always be barefoot. Shoes are a luxury for the weak. You are forced to go barefoot in all seasons for all activities. You run over rocky ground, through thorny bushes, and across icy fields in winter. The purpose is twofold. First, it hardens your feet, turning the soles into thick, leathery pads that can withstand any terrain. A Spartan warrior can't be slowed down by a blister. Second, it makes you more nimble. The Spartans believed that going barefoot made a man quicker, more agile, and better able to climb and leap than a man hobbled by sandals. So, your feet are in a constant state of pain, slowly building up a resilience that will one day be a tactical advantage. Your physical regimen is relentless and varied. It's not just about running. You will wrestle, box, and practice the pancration, an all-out combat sport with very few rules. No eye gouging or biting were the main restrictions. You throw the javelin and the discus, not just for sport, but for military application. These are the skills of a soldier. The training is designed to push you past your limits, to make pain a familiar companion. If you are not collapsing at the end of the day, you have not trained hard enough. You are also perpetually hungry. The rations provided by the state are intentionally meager. You are given just enough food to survive, but never enough to feel full. This serves several purposes. It accustoms your body to functioning on minimal fuel, a crucial skill for a soldier on campaign. It also keeps you lean and weary, preventing you from becoming sluggish. And, most importantly, it creates a constant, gnawing hunger that you are expected to solve through your own initiative, a lesson that will come later. This brings us to the mainstream historical point: the entire agoge. It was a system of graduated hardship. As you get older, the training gets tougher, the food gets scarcer. It's a carefully calibrated process of breaking you down and rebuilding you into something the state desires. The system is designed to weed out anyone who cannot endure. There is no opting out. The only way forward is through. Now for a strange and specific detail about your training. One of your regular activities is a series of ritualized, almost dance-like exercises performed to the sound of a flute. It might seem odd, this injection of music into a brutal military regimen. But for the Spartans, it was essential. These were the pyrrhiki or war dances. You would move in formation, mimicking the actions of combat, thrusting a spear, blocking with a shield, dodging an attack, all in perfect time to the music. This wasn't about artistic expression, it was about instilling rhythm and unity. The flute's tempo dictated the pace of your movements, training you to act as a single, coordinated body. This was the foundation of the phalanx. When you marched into battle, it would be to the sound of those same flutes, their calming, steady rhythm helping to control fear and maintain the cohesion of the line. Your brutal training had a soundtrack. This use of music in a military context leads to an interesting point of academic debate. How much of Spartan culture was truly their own unique invention versus a relic of a much older, more common Greek tradition? For a long time, Sparta was seen as a complete anomaly, a society that took a hard right turn away from the path of all other Greek city-states. But some historians now argue that Sparta might be better understood as an arrested development. They suggest that many of its strange customs, the public messes, the warrior bands, the initiation rituals were actually common features of an early Iron Age Greece. While other cities like Athens evolved, developing democracy, philosophy, and elaborate art, Sparta simply didn't. They clung to these ancient, militaristic traditions, refining them and elevating them to a state religion. Sparta isn't the weird outlier, it's a perfectly preserved fossil of a much earlier stage of Greek society. The question of whether Sparta was a radical innovator or a radical conservative is still being discussed. For you, a shivering, barefoot boy, such theories are meaningless. All you know is the cold, the hunger, and the constant ache in your muscles. You run until your lungs burn. You wrestle until your body is a canvas of bruises. You practice your war dance, the flute's music a strange counterpoint to your exhaustion. You are being systematically hardened, like steel in a forge. Each day is a test, and passing just means you get to face the next one. You are learning to endure. Your stomach is a hollow, aching void. The meager rations of barley porridge and boiled meat you receive at the barracks are never enough. This constant hunger is not a flaw in the system, it's a feature. It is designed to teach you a crucial skill for a future soldier: foraging, or, to put it more bluntly, stealing. You are actively encouraged to supplement your diet by stealing food from the farms and homes around the city. This is considered a vital part of your education. However, there is a very important catch. Stealing is honorable, getting caught is the ultimate disgrace. If you are caught, you are punished severely, not for the act of theft itself, but for your incompetence. Your crime was your clumsiness, your failure to execute the mission successfully. The punishment is a brutal whipping, administered publicly. So, you learn to be sly, to be quick, to be silent. You plan your little raids with the seriousness of a military operation. You might team up with a few of your bunkmates to create a diversion while another snatches a loaf of bread from a baker's window or a chicken from a coop. This state-sanctioned thievery is one of the most well-documented aspects of the agoge. Xenophon describes it in detail, framing it as a practical test of your cunning and agility. It teaches you to live off the land, to operate in enemy territory, and to take calculated risks. The world becomes a landscape of opportunity and danger. Every unguarded field, every unlocked pantry is a target. Your senses become sharp. You learn to read the patterns of the day, to know when a farmer is away from his fields, when a kitchen is left unattended. Your childhood games are exercises in espionage and larceny. This leads us to a particularly odd and specific story about this custom, relayed by Plutarch. It's the tale of a boy who had stolen a live fox and was hiding it under his cloak. He was on his way back to the barracks when he ran into some of the older youths who were in charge. They began to question him. To reveal the fox would be to admit his theft, which would mean he had been caught. So as they interrogated him, he stood his ground, saying nothing. The fox, trapped under his cloak, began to bite and claw at him, tearing into his stomach. The boy didn't flinch, didn't cry out, didn't betray any sign of pain. He held his composure until the animal literally disemboweled him, and he dropped dead at their feet. The story is held up as the ultimate example of Spartan endurance and commitment to the code. He died rather than face the dishonor of being a clumsy thief. Now, did this actually happen? It sounds incredibly extreme, almost like a folk tale designed to illustrate a point. But it's a perfect example of the kind of stories the Spartans told about themselves, and that others told about them. It encapsulates the ethos of their society. Pain is temporary, but dishonor is permanent. But this practice of theft, and the brutal punishment for failure, raises a complex question that historians still grapple with. Who were the victims of this theft? You were stealing from the agricultural lands surrounding Sparta. But who worked that land? Not you, and not other Spartan citizens. The entire Spartan economic system was built on the backs of a subjugated population known as the Helots. The Helots were Greeks from the surrounding regions of Laconia and Messenia, whom the Spartans had conquered centuries earlier. They were not slaves in the sense that they could be bought and sold individually, but they were bound to the land they worked. The kale arrows assigned to each Spartan citizen. They were serfs with no rights, who were forced to give a huge portion of their produce to their Spartan masters. So when you, a young Spartan boy, sneak onto a farm to steal a pig, you are not just stealing from some anonymous farmer. You are stealing from a Helot family. This system creates a very strange dynamic. The state is encouraging you to practice your military skills by preying on the very people whose labor supports your entire way of life. Was this just about teaching you to be sneaky, or was it also a tool of psychological warfare? Some historians argue that this was a deliberate policy of terror and humiliation. It constantly reminded the Helots of their powerlessness. It taught you, from a young age, to view the Helots not as people, but as resources to be exploited and controlled. The honorable theft was a foundational lesson in oppression. It was training for a lifetime of being a master, ruling over a restive and resentful population that vastly outnumbered your own. Your midnight snack was part of a state-sponsored system of control. You succeed in your mission. You and your friends return to the barracks with a stolen cheese, or a handful of figs. You eat it quickly, silently, in the dark. The taste of the forbidden food is the taste of victory. You have not just fed your stomach, you have passed another test. You have proven you are resourceful. You have proven you are resourceful. You have proven you are worthy. For a brief moment, the hunger is gone, but you know it will be back tomorrow. Your education is not all physical hardship and state-sponsored petty crime. Your mind is also being shaped, though not in the way an Athenian boy's would be. You do not study philosophy, rhetoric, or the finer points of democratic debate. Such pursuits are considered frivolous, dangerous even. They encourage individualism and critical thinking that might lead one to question the system. Your intellectual training is practical, focused on memory, discipline, and the reinforcement of Spartan values. You are taught to read and write, but only the bare minimum necessary for military and administrative tasks. Literacy is a tool, not an art form. You need to be able to read orders and write reports, nothing more. There is no Spartan Shakespeare, no library filled with epic poetry of your own making. You learn the works of Homer, the Iliad and the Odyssey, but they are taught as military manuals, not as literature. You study the heroic virtues of Achilles and Hector, the tactics at sieges, and the glory of dying in battle. A huge part of your education is musical and choral. This might seem surprising, but it's entirely functional. You spend hours memorizing unsinging war chants, patriotic hymns, and the songs celebrating Sparta's history and heroes. This serves multiple purposes. It's a powerful tool for indoctrination, drilling the state's ideology into your head through repetition and melody. It also builds group cohesion. Singing together, like marching together, turns a group of individuals into a single, unified entity. The songs you sing will be the same ones you shout as you advance in the phalanx. Your most famous intellectual training, however, is in the art of conversation, or rather, the lack of it. You are taught to be laconic, a word that comes directly from Laconia, the region where Sparta is located. It means to speak in short, pithy, and often witty phrases. Long-winded speeches are a sign of Athenian decadence. A true Spartan can express a complex thought in a handful of words. This is drilled into you from a young age. At the communal meals, the older men will purposefully quiz you, asking sharp questions to test your ability to give a quick, intelligent, and often humorous reply. A slow or foolish answer could earn you a bite on the thumb as a mild punishment. This laconic wit is a well-known historical fact. The ancient world was full of stories about Spartan one-liners. When Philip of Macedon sent a threatening message to Sparta saying, "If I enter Laconia, I will raise Sparta to the ground," the Spartan horse sent back a reply of a single word, "if." The brevity was more intimidating than any long threat could be. This was the ideal you were in to emulate. This brings us to a wonderfully weird and specific detail, the Spartan sense of humor. We think of them as grim and humorless, but they had a very particular brand of dry, sarcastic, and often dark wit. It was another tool for building resilience. They made jokes about the extreme hardship of their own lives. For example, when an outsider, after tasting their infamous black broth of foul-smelling soup made of pork, salt, vinegar, and blood, commented that he now understood why Spartans were so eager to die in battle, a Spartan might have just nodded in agreement. They could laugh at themselves so long as the laughter reinforced their values of toughness. This wasn't stand-up comedy. It was a coping mechanism in the form of social signaling. If you could crack a dry joke about your own misery, you proved you were unfazed by it. But this raises a challenging historical question: how do we truly understand the Spartan mind? Our sources are almost exclusively external. We have no Spartan philosophy, no political treatises, no diaries. We are trying to reconstruct their entire worldview from the observations of their rivals like the Athenians, their admirers like Xenophon, or later Roman writers like Plutarch. It's like trying to understand a company's internal culture based only on their television commercials and the news reports of their competitors. Are we getting a true picture or caricature? Some historians argue that we vastly underestimate the intellectual life of the Spartans. They point to the fact that early Sparta, before it became so rigidly militarized, was a center for poetry and music. Famous poets like A.L. Manon Terpenter worked there. Did that entire cultural tradition just vanish, or did it go underground? Surviving in ways our sources don't record. The prevailing view is that the military state effectively stamped it out. But the debate remains: was there a hidden, more complex intellectual world behind the laconic mask? We can only speculate. For you, this is your reality. You learn your letters. You sing your songs of war and glory. You practice your witty comebacks, hoping to earn a nod of approval from the old warriors. Your mind, like your body, is being molded into a very specific shape. It is being made sharp, efficient, and unquestioning. You are a weapon, and every part of you, from your hardened feet to your sharp tongue, is being honed for the service of the state. All this training, the barefoot running, the constant hunger, the laconic retorts, isn't just for the eventual battlefield. It has to be tested, demonstrated, and turned into a public spectacle. Your worth is not just about what you can do, but what you can be seen to endure. And there is one particular annual festival where this endurance is put on the ultimate display. It takes place at the sanctuary of Artemis or Thea. You walk with your group towards her temple. Artemis or Thea is an ancient and rather grim goddess, a fusion of the familiar Greek Artemis, the huntress, with a much older local deity. Her sanctuary is not a place of serene beauty, but of primal power. There's a wooden altar, stained dark from years of rituals, and on this altar today are placed several small, tempting wheels of cheese. Yes, cheese. Your goal in this important religious ceremony is to steal a piece of cheese. It sounds like a child's game, but it is deadly serious. This is the main event, a rite of passage known as the agoge. The rules are simple. You, along with the other boys, must make a dash for the altar, snatch a piece of cheese, and get away. The catch is that the altar is guarded by oldies armed with whips. Their job is to flog you mercilessly as you make your attempt. The goal is not just to get the cheese, it is to do so without crying out, without flinching, without showing any sign of pain. The crowd gathers. This is a major public event. Your family might be in the crowd, your father, perhaps even your mother, their faces unreadable, watching to see if you will bring them honor or shame. You stand, waiting your turn, your heart pounding a rhythm against your ribs that is faster than any flute music you've danced to. You watch the boys ahead of you. Some are quick and manage to grab a prize, their backs already crisscrossed with red welts. Others stumble, are caught, and are lashed until they retreat in failure. Then it's your turn. You take a breath, fix your eyes on the prize, and you run. The air explodes. The sting of the first whip across your back is a shock of pure fire. You ignore it. You ignore it. Another catches your legs. You are a projectile aimed at the altar. Your hand closes around the waxy surface of the cheese. As you turn to run, a whip catches your arm, and you almost drop it. You grip it tighter, tuck it against your body, and sprint away from the altar, the lashes still raining down on you until you are clear. You've done it. You stand, chest heaving, back and legs screaming in pain, but you hold the cheese aloft. You have not made a sound. The pain is immense, but the feeling of triumph, of having passed the test in front of everyone, is greater. You have converted raw pain into social currency honor. This brings us to a wonderfully strange detail. Why cheese of all the things to place on an altar for a bloody ritual? Why a dairy product? It seems absurd. The historical reason is likely tied to the goddess or Thea herself, who may have been an agricultural or pastoral deity before she was merged with Artemis. The cheese is a relic of an ancient harvest or offering ritual. But over time, its original meaning was lost, and it became simply the strange prize in a test of manhood. It's a perfect example of how rituals can persist long after their purpose is forgotten, becoming an ingrained tradition that nobody questions. The absurdity of risking a brutal flogging for a piece of cheese was, to the Spartans, not absurd at all. It was simply the way things were done. However, the very nature of this ritual is a source of major historical debate. The version you just experienced is the one made famous by later Roman-era writers like Plutarch and Cicero. By their time, Sparta was a shadow of its former self, a part of the Roman Empire. The agoge had been revived, but it was more of a tourist attraction than a genuine military academy. The agoge became a notorious, bloody spectacle. Wealthy Romans would travel to Sparta and sit on specially built stone tiers to watch boys get flogged, sometimes to death at the altar. It was a brutal piece of performance art, a commercialized reenactment of Spartan toughness. But was it always like this? Our earliest source, Xenophon, who wrote during Sparta's classical peak, described something far milder. He mentions boys trying to steal cheese and being whipped, but he frames it as part of the honorable theft training you're already familiar with. There's no mention of a formal, brutal, life-or-death ritual. So, historians are left to argue, did the bloody Roman spectacle evolve from a much simpler, tougher game, or was Xenophon, an admirer of Sparta, deliberately downplaying a brutal ritual to make his beloved Spartans seem less savage to his Athenian audience? Did the ritual start as a game, become a test of honor, and end as a tourist trap. The evolution of the cheese-grabbing contest is a perfect microcosm of Sparta's own history, from authentic hardship to a self-conscious performance of that hardship. For you, standing there with your prize, the future of the ritual is unknown. All you know is that you have faced the whips and won. You have proven yourself. The pain will fade. The scars will be a testament to your fortitude. You have earned your place. As you grow older, moving from a boy into a youth, your world within the agoge shifts. You are no longer just a receiver of discipline, you are starting to become a part of the system that administers it. But a more significant change is coming. You are now at an age somewhere around 12 to 14 where you are expected to attract the attention of an older warrior. This is the beginning of one of the most controversial and fundamental aspects of Spartan society: institutionalized pederasty. One day, a man singles you out. He is not one of your direct trainers from the barracks. He is a full citizen, a soldier in his 20s, a member of a communal dining club. He has been watching you for some time during your exercises, at the cheese-stealing ritual, in your mock battles. He sees potential in you. He approaches you, not with softness, but with the same direct, appraising manner that defines all Spartan interactions. He is to be your Aristes, your lover or inspired, his listener or beloved. This is not a casual or hidden affair, it is a formal, public, and socially recognized relationship. Your Aristes becomes your mentor, your guide, and your personal role model. He is responsible for your development in a much more intimate way than the general paidonomos he will find in your training, give you extra instruction, and critique your performance with a sharp eye. He is invested in your success. Your triumphs bring him honor, your failures bring him shame. In fact, if you commit a serious offense, it is your Aristes who will be punished by the magistrates, for he is accountable for your character. This relationship is the primary vehicle for transmitting Spartan values from one generation to the next. It's through your mentor that you learn the unwritten rules of being a Spartan man. You learn about courage, honor, and self-sacrifice not from abstract lessons, but from the living example of a warrior you admire. The bond between you is meant to be incredibly strong, a love that would make you fight more fiercely in battle, to protect your mentor and to make him proud. This is the mainstream historical understanding of the institution. It was a core part of the military and social structure, designed to create powerful emotional bonds that would strengthen the phalanx. Now for the stranger, more specific detail of this arrangement. The courtship process was highly ritualized. Unlike in other Greek cities where such relationships were often private matters, in Sparta, it was a competitive public arena. Several men might be interested in the same promising youth. According to the sources, these rival suitors would not compete for the boy's affection with gifts or poetry, but would sometimes literally fight each other to prove who was the worthier mentor. The boy himself also had a say. He had the power to choose his Aristes, and choosing a man of great virtue and reputation was a mark of the boy's own good character. It was a serious business, a kind of social contract. Furthermore, the nature of the physical relationship was unique. While most of modern scholarship agrees that these relationships included a physical, sexual component, the Spartan ideal, as described by writers like Xenophon, was that it should be a chaste love. The affection should be based on the boy's character and inner virtue, psyche, not his physical beauty. So the ideal was a love of souls, not bodies. Any man who was seen to be interested in a boy merely for his looks was shamed. This created a strange paradox, a socially mandatory, homoerotic relationship that was, at least in its public ideology, supposed to be non-sexual. This brings us to one of the most intense and ongoing debates among historians of ancient Greece. What was the real nature of these relationships? Was the chaste ideal a reality, or was it a piece of public relations spin? A way for pro-Spartan writers to make the practice seem more noble than it was. Many historians are deeply skeptical of the chaste claim. They argue that it's naive to believe these intense, emotional bonds formed in a hypermasculine military environment, were purely platonic. They suggest the chaste ideal was just that, an ideal, which was likely violated in practice all the time. Other scholars take a different view. They argue that we shouldn't impose our modern understanding of love and sexuality onto the Spartans. Perhaps their culture was capable of creating a form of passionate, loving, but non-sexual bond between men that we simply don't have a modern equivalent for. They point out that the penalties for purely carnal relationships were severe, suggesting that the Spartans genuinely tried to enforce this distinction. The truth is, the evidence is ambiguous and contradictory. The sources, all written by men from outside or long after the period, are filtering the reality through their own biases. We are left with a system that was central to Spartan life, yet its most intimate details remain a profound mystery. You now have a mentor. Your life is no longer just about group survival, it's about personal honor. You strive to impress him, to live up to his expectations. His presence is a constant pressure, a constant motivation. This bond is now the central pillar of your young life, the axis around which your world turns. It is the most profound connection you will experience, forged in the unique crucible of the agoge. The years pass. You are now in your mid to late teens, a seasoned veteran of the agoge. Either barefoot running, the meager rations, the whips, they are no longer shocks to the system, but the familiar rhythm of your life. Your body is hard, scarred, and deficient. Your mind is sharp and disciplined. You have survived. But now, your role begins to shift. You are no longer at the bottom of the food chain. New groups of 7-year-olds are arriving. Their faces a mixture, bravado, just as yours once was. And now, you are one of the older boys in charge. You are given a whip. It feels strange and powerful in your hand. You are now an instrument of the state's discipline. You become a leader of a small group of younger boys, and it is your job to supervise their training, to drill them, to lead their mock battles, and to enforce the rules. You are the one who now presides over the dinner table quizzes, testing their laconic wit. You are the one who inspects their reed beds and punishes them for clumsiness when they are caught stealing. The cycle is completing itself. You have moved from trainee to trainer, from the oppressed to the oppressor. This is a critical part of your education, a sort of internship in command. You learn leadership not from a book, but by doing it. You learn how to instill discipline, how to spot weakness, how to motivate a group of scared, hungry kids. You are essentially a junior drill sergeant, and your performance is being watched by the paid onomos and the other full citizens. This is your chance to demonstrate your leadership potential, a key requirement for becoming a full member of Spartan society. You are learning to wield power responsibly, or at least effectively, by Spartan standards. This transition brings a very specific and peculiar change in your dining habits. As an Iren, you are now allowed to have your own food at the communal mess, in addition to the standard rations. But you don't get this food served to you. The younger boys under your command are now required to steal for you. Part of their duty is to go on their raids and bring back extra food, a bit of meat, some wheat cakes, figs as a tribute to their leader. This reinforces the hierarchy in a very tangible way. You now benefit directly from their skill as thieves. It's a clever system. You are motivated to train them well in the art of theft because their success directly contributes to your own comfort. It's a primitive form of performance-based compensation. However, this new power comes with a dark side, which leads to a difficult point of historical contention. The authority you and other older boys wielded was absolute, and the potential for abuse was enormous. The system was predicated on violence and intimidation, while the official goal was to create disciplined soldiers. What did this do to the psychology of the boys involved? Historians debate whether the agoge was a well-oiled machine for producing patriots, or a brutal system that normalized violence and created bullies. Critics argue that by giving teenagers whips and total authority over younger children, the state was essentially cultivating a culture of cruelty. The line between necessary discipline and sadistic abuse could be very thin. It's likely that for every responsible Iran who acted as a fair, if strict, mentor, there was another who took pleasure in the power, who was vindictive and overly harsh. The system had few checks and balances to prevent this. We have to wonder how many boys were psychologically scarred or broken by the casual brutality of their older peers. Was this a system that built character, or one that crushed it, replacing it with a hardened shell of aggression? The Spartans would have argued it was the former, but many modern historians lean towards the latter, seeing the agoge as a deeply damaging institution, regardless of its military effectiveness. For you, the experience is transformative. You see the system from the other side. You feel the weight of responsibility. You dish out punishments that you yourself once received. You might feel a flicker of sympathy for the shivering 7-year-old you're about to discipline, a memory of your own past self, but you suppress it. Sympathy is a weakness. The system requires you to be hard. You are shaping them just as you were shaped. You are forging them into weapons. Just as you were forged, you are a cog in the machine, and now your job is to help turn the newer cogs. The pride you feel in your new authority is mixed with the grim understanding that you are perpetuating the same cycle of hardship that defined your entire life. This is what it means to become a Spartan man. As you approach the end of your teenage years, you might be selected for an elite, shadowy institution that operates on the fringes of the agoge. This is not a mandatory part of the training for everyone. It is a secret society, a finishing school for the most promising and perhaps the most ruthless young Spartans. It is called the Cryptia. The name itself is mysterious, derived from the Greek word kryptos, meaning hidden or secret. To be chosen for the Cryptia is a mark of high distinction, but it is a dark honor. If you are selected, you are stripped of your usual barracks life. You are sent out from the city, alone, with nothing but a knife. You are given no food, no cloak, no support. Your mission is to survive in the countryside, to live off the land, and to remain unseen. You hide during the day, sleeping in thickets or remote hills. You move only at night, a ghost in the landscape of Laconia. Your training in stealth, foraging, and endurance is now put to the ultimate test. This is real. This secretive survival training is a well-attested, if poorly understood, aspect of Spartan life. Aristotle, the famous philosopher and a contemporary of Sparta's decline, described the Cryptia as a form of advanced military training. He said the magistrates would send the young men out to toughen them up and teach them to fend for themselves. It was the final exam of the agoge, a solo mission designed to produce the ultimate survivor. But there was a much darker purpose to the Cryptia, and this is where it gets truly chilling. Your nocturnal wanderings were not aimless. You were specifically tasked with observing and terrorizing the Helot population. You would move through the farmlands that the Helots worked, listening, watching, and identifying any who seemed strong, intelligent, or potentially rebellious. And then, under the cover of darkness, you would act. Your mission, according to Plutarch, was to kill any Helot you caught traveling the roads at night. The goal was to eliminate potential leaders and to instill a constant, pervasive fear in the subjugated population. It was state-sanctioned terrorism carried out by its best and brightest young men. This brings us to a strange and horrifying detail related to this practice. Plutarch claims that each year, the ephors, the 5 senior magistrates who held immense power in Sparta, would formally declare war on the Helot population. This was not a joke or a metaphor. It was a legal and religious declaration. The purpose of this was to make the killing of a Helot a guiltless act. By being officially at war, you, as a member of the Cryptia, could kill a Helot without incurring blood guilt or angering the gods. It was a bureaucratic loophole for murder, a way to ritually cleanse an act of brutal oppression. This annual declaration of war highlights the deep, paranoid fear that lay at the heart of Spartan society. They were a small ruling class living on top of a vast, resentful population, and they used every tool at their disposal, legal, religious, and military to maintain their dominance. Naturally, the true nature and scale of the cryptia is a subject of intense academic debate. Was it, as Aristotle seems to suggest, primarily a harsh survival school, with the anti-helot mission being a secondary, if brutal component, or was it, as Plutarch's much later account implies, a full-blown secret police, a death squad whose main purpose was to cull the helot population? Some historians argue that Plutarch's account is a sensationalized story written for a Roman audience that craved tales of Spartan extremity. They suggest the killings might have been rare, targeted assassinations of known troublemakers rather than random murders of anyone caught out at night. Others argue that we should take the sources at their word. They believe the cryptia was a fundamental instrument of helot control, a key reason why the Spartans were able to maintain their system for so long despite being so vastly outnumbered. The debate hinges on how we interpret the limited and often contradictory evidence. Was the cryptia a wilderness boot camp or a state-run murder academy? The line is blurry, and the truth is likely as dark as the nights in which you now operate. You move silently through the darkness, the knife in your hand feeling cold and heavy. You are hungry, you are isolated, and you are hunting humans. You are learning the final and most brutal lesson of Spartan power, that your survival, and the survival of your state, depends on the systematic oppression of others. This experience will change you forever. It will strip away the last vestiges of your childhood innocence. When you finally return to the city, you will not just be a trained soldier. You will be a keeper of Sparta's darkest secret. You return from the wilderness. Whether you were part of the cryptia or simply completed the standard regimen of the agoge, you are now around 20 years old. You are no longer a boy or a youth. You are a man Hebon, but you are not yet a full citizen. You have graduated from the academy, but you have not yet been accepted into the club. Your final test is to gain entry into a SYS city and a communal dining mess. This is not a casual affair. The SYS city is the core institution of Spartan civic life. It is a group of about 15 men who eat every meal together, contribute to a common stock of food, and fight alongside each other in battle. To be a Spartan citizen, a homo ios one of the equals, you must be a member of the SYS city. If you fail to gain entry, or if you are later kicked out for not paying your dues, you lose your citizenship. This is social and political life or death. The process of being admitted is a tense, democratic ritual. You are presented to the members of a specific mess, perhaps one your father or mentor belongs to. The current members will cast their votes on your admission, and they do so in a very peculiar way. The steward of the mess walks around the room with a container, and each member is given a small ball of soft bread. They then walk up to the container and, without anyone seeing, either drop the ball in as it is or squeeze it flat in their hand before dropping it in. A round ball of bread is a yes vote. A flattened piece of bread is a no vote. It is an ancient form of secret ballot. After everyone has voted, the steward empties the container onto a table for all to see. The vote must be unanimous. If there is even a single flattened piece of bread, a single black ball, you are rejected. You have failed. You must then try to find another mess that will accept you. To be rejected multiple times is the ultimate public humiliation. This voting method is one of those fantastic, specific historical details that brings the scene to life. The soft bread, the silent judgment, the communal gaze as the votes are revealed, it's a moment of pure social anxiety. Why bread? Likely because it was readily available at every meal. A simple, disposable tool for a profound decision. It's a beautifully practical solution for a high-stakes problem. Let's assume you are accepted. A wave of relief washes over you. You are now a member. You will take your meals here, in this room, with these men for the next 40 years. The atmosphere is not one of solemnity, but of gruff camaraderie. The food is simple. The conversation is laconic and full of the dark humor you've been trained in. The infamous black broth is a staple, a daily reminder of your austere life. The older men will still grill you with questions, keeping you sharp. It is here that public opinion is formed, that political discussions happen, and that the bonds of the phalanx are cemented over shared food and wine. This brings us to a fascinating and much debated aspect of the SYSYS city and how equal were the equals the Spartans called themselves the homo. Ioa suggesting a society of perfect peers. But was this true? The rule was that every man had to contribute a set amount of produce to the mess each month from his kale arrows, his allotment of land worked by helots. The standard contribution was a large quantity of barley, wine, cheese, and figs, plus a small amount of money for meat. But what happened if a man's kale arrows was less fertile than his neighbor's? What if his helots were rebellious and his harvest was poor? What if, over time, some families accumulated more plots of land than others through inheritance or marriage? Historians now believe that, despite the ideology of equality, significant wealth disparities existed in Sparta. Some Spartans were far richer than others. A rich Spartan could easily meet his monthly dues and even contribute extra luxuries like a fine cut of meat or better wine, earning him prestige within the mess. A poor Spartan might struggle constantly to make his payments. If he failed, he would suffer the ultimate shame of being demoted to a lesser class of citizen, an inferior. So was the SYS city and a great leveler, forcing all men to live the same simple life, or was it actually a mechanism that reinforced and exposed wealth differences, creating a constant pressure on the poorer members of the elite? The academic consensus has shifted. The old image of a perfectly egalitarian warrior class has given way to a more nuanced picture of a society with deep internal economic tensions, all hidden behind a facade of communal austerity. The ideal of equality was just that, an ideal. The reality was a constant struggle to keep up appearances and pay your dues. You have made it. You are in. You have a seat at the table. You will spend your evenings here, listening to the stories of veterans, sharing your own experiences, and forging the bonds that will hold the line on the battlefield. You are a full Spartan, a peer of the realm, but your work is far from over. In fact, it has just begun. You are now a soldier 24for the next 40 years. You are now a full-time soldier. Your life is a routine of drill, exercise, and readiness. You are a hoplite, a heavy infantryman, and your entire existence has been geared towards one purpose: to function as a flawless component in the fighting machine known as the phalanx. The phalanx is not just a formation, it's a social and psychological organism. It's a rectangular block of men, typically 8 ranks deep. You stand shoulder to shoulder with the men from your SYS city and your dining companions, your brothers in arms. The man to your left is protected by the right side of your shield. You are protected by the shield of the man to your right. It is a system built on mutual dependence. Your survival is literally in the hands of the man next to you. This is why the bonds forged in the agoge and the mess hall are so critical. You must trust the men around you implicitly. Your panoply is your second skin. You have a bronze helmet, often in the Corinthian style, that covers your entire face, leaving only your eyes and mouth visible. It's intimidating to the enemy but isolating for you, funneling your senses forward. You have a bronze cuirass protecting your chest and back, and bronze greaves protecting your shins. Your primary weapon is the dory long spear, around 8 to 9 feet in length, with a sharp iron head and a bronze but spike called a sauroter or lizard killer, which could be used to finish off fallen enemies or to stick the spear in the ground. Your secondary weapon is a short sword, the Ziphos for close quarters combat if the spear breaks or the formation dissolves. Now for a peculiar, non-military detail of your daily life as a soldier. You are famous for your long hair. In an era when most other Greek men were cutting their hair short, you and your fellow Spartan warriors cultivated long, flowing locks. Before a battle, you would engage in an almost ritualistic grooming session. Herodotus tells a famous story of a Persian scout who, before the Battle of Thermopylae, spied on the Spartan camp and was shocked to see the men calmly combing and styling each other's long hair as if preparing for a festival. He reported this back to King Xerxes, who thought it was a sign of madness or vanity. But a Greek advisor explained the truth: when these men are about to risk their lives, they adorn their heads. It was a sign of supreme confidence and readiness. It was a way of beautifying oneself for a heroic death. It was a psychological weapon, an act of defiant coolness in the face of annihilation. This hairstyle, however, leads to a point of historical debate. Why the long hair Plutarch offers a simple explanation given by the legendary lawgiver Lycurgus. It makes the handsome more beautiful and the ugly more terrible. This is a classic laconic answer, but historians look for deeper reasons. Some argue it was a marker of your status as a full citizen and warrior. While you were in the agoge, your hair was kept short. Growing it long was a privilege of adulthood, a visual sign that you were no longer a boy. Others suggest it was an archaic symbol, a relic from the age of Homeric heroes, which the Spartans deliberately preserved to link themselves to that glorious, mythical past. While other Greeks modernized, the Spartans held on to this ancient symbol of aristocratic warriorhood. The true reason is likely a combination of these factors: status, tradition, and psychological intimidation. You spend your days practicing the movements of the phalanx. The advance, the wheel, the charge. You practice to the sound of the flute, its rhythm ensuring every man steps at the same time, maintaining the integrity of the wall of shields. The goal is to make the formation move as if it were a single, many-legged creature. Your individual identity is completely sublimated. You are not you, you are a piece of the wall. You are the man third from the left in the second rank. That is your whole world. When the moment of battle comes, fear is not an individual emotion, it's a collective risk to the formation. You hold the line not just out of personal bravery, but out of a deep-seated fear of shame and a profound sense of duty to the men standing next to you. This is what you were born for. This is the final product of the long, brutal assembly line. You are now in your 20s. You are a full-fledged soldier, a member of a mess, a cog in the phalanx. Your life is settled into a predictable rhythm of training and military duty. But the state is not finished with you. There is one more crucial civic obligation you must fulfill. You must get married. The decision to marry is not yours to make, not really. It's not a matter of love, or personal readiness, or finding the one. It is a state mandate. The purpose of your life is to serve Sparta, and one of your primary services is to produce the next generation of soldiers. Unmarried men over a certain age, likely around 30, were not just frowned upon, they were publicly shamed and penalized. There was a specific ritual where bachelors would be paraded around the marketplace in the middle of winter, naked and forced to sing a song about how they were being justly punished for disobeying the laws. They were also barred from watching the boys' exercises, a significant social exclusion. Celibacy was a crime against the state, so the pressure is on. It's time to find a wife. This process, like everything else in Sparta, is stripped of the romance and sentimentality we associate with it. You are not looking for a soulmate. You are looking for a breeding partner. Your goal is to find a woman who will produce strong, healthy children. This is a matter of eugenics, plain and simple. A mainstream historical fact here is that Spartan men were legally and socially compelled to marry. It was seen as just as much of a duty as fighting in the phalanx. The survival of Sparta's small citizen class depended entirely on a steady birth rate to replace warriors lost in battle and to maintain control over the helots. A man who refused this duty was seen as a deserter, shirking his responsibility to the collective. Now for a very strange, and frankly a bit creepy, detail about this process. According to Plutarch, there was a form of marriage by capture, but it wasn't the violent bride kidnapping you might see in myths. Instead, it was a highly ritualized and secretive affair. Men would often choose their brides and then abduct them at night. This wasn't a surprise attack on a random woman, It was a prearranged, clandestine event. It suggests that courtship, such as it was, happened in the shadows. There were no public dates, no family introductions in the way we'd imagine. The entire process of pairing off was done with a degree of stealth and secrecy, mirroring the clandestine nature of so much of Spartan life. It was yet another mission to be carried out under the cover of darkness. This leads to a fascinating historical debate. Did Spartan men and women have any say in whom they married? The traditional view, based on the eugenic focus and the marriage by capture ritual, is that these were largely arranged affairs, with parents or the state having a heavy hand in the pairings. The primary criteria were health, physique, and lineage, a transaction designed to merge to strong bloodlines. However, some historians are pushing back against this cold, calculated view. They argue that we might be underestimating the role of personal choice and even affection. The clandestine nature of the courtship might have actually given young people more freedom, not less. Away from the prying eyes of their families, they could meet and form attachments based on mutual attraction. The abduction might have been a way to formalize a match that the couple had already chosen for themselves, a bit of ritual theater to satisfy tradition. We have a few sources that hint at this. Xenophon, for example, mentions a Spartan king being criticized for choosing a wife who was small, not for eugenics reasons, but because he was genuinely in love with her. This suggests that affection could, and did, play a role. So was marriage a cold, state-run breeding program, or was there room for individual attraction and love within the rigid system? The truth is likely somewhere in between, a system that demanded eugenic ally sound choices, but within which personal preference could still operate. You begin to look for a partner. You are not observing her for her wit or her charm, but for her physical attributes. Is she tall? Is she strong? Does she come from a family known for producing healthy children? These are the questions in your mind. You might see her exercising with the other young women. For Spartan girls, unlike their Athenian counterparts, were also given a state-sponsored physical education. You see her running, wrestling, throwing the javelin. Her health and fitness are on public display, just as yours were. She is not a delicate flower to be hidden away. She is the other half of the biological equation. You make your choice. Arrangements are made, likely through an intermediary. The time is set. Soon, you will carry out your own secret night mission, not to steal cheese or terrorize helots, but to claim your bride. The choice has been made. You have selected the woman who will be your wife. This is perhaps the most significant decision you will make as an individual, yet it feels less like a personal choice and more like a strategic acquisition. You are not thinking about a life partner, you are thinking about the future of your bloodline and the future of the state. Your criteria for selection are brutally pragmatic. The primary historical understanding is that mate selection in Sparta was heavily influenced by eugenic principles. The goal was to pair the best women to produce the best offspring. This concept, while shocking to us, was foundational to the Spartan worldview. They applied the principles of selective breeding, which they used for their horses and dogs, directly to their own population. A strong, tall, and healthy woman was considered a prize because she was likely to bear strong, tall, and healthy children, specifically sons who could become elite soldiers. You would have observed her from a distance. Unlike in Athens, where respectable girls were kept in seclusion, Spartan girls and young women had a very public life. They underwent their own form of state-sponsored education, which included vigorous physical exercise. You would have seen them at their drills, running, wrestling, throwing the discus and javelin, often exercising in minimal clothing. This wasn't for titillation, it was a public showcase of their physical fitness. It was, in essence, a constant advertisement of their breeding potential. You are, in the coldest terms, shopping for good genes. This brings us to a strange and specific aspect of the selection process, the role of wealth and property. While physical fitness was paramount, a woman's family background also mattered immensely. Specifically, what mattered was her potential to inherit land. Spartan law was unique in the Greek world because women could inherit and own property in their own right. If a woman's father had no sons, she could inherit his entire Kale his ancestral plot of land. Such a woman was known as a pat rauchos, an heiress. Marrying an heiress was the primary way for a Spartan man to increase his wealth and social standing. If you married a pat rauchos hurl and would eventually be passed on to your children, securing your family's fortune. Over time, this led to a massive concentration of wealth in the hands of a few families, as heiresses from wealthy families were married off to men from other wealthy families. Aristotle, in the 4th century BC, famously complained that 2/5 of all the land in Sparta was owned by women, and he blamed this system for the decline in the number of Spartan citizens. So while you're looking for a strong physique, you or your family are also keenly aware of the financial implications. The ideal bride was a combination of an Olympic athlete and a wealthy heiress. This economic aspect of marriage gives rise to a significant historical debate: what was the primary driver of Spartan marriage, eugenics, or economics? The traditional narrative, fueled by writers like Plutarch, emphasizes the state's obsession with producing beautiful, strong babies. However, more critical historians, like Aristotle, point to the cold, hard economics. They argue that the desire to accumulate land became the dominant factor, even overriding the eugenic impulse. This created a huge problem. Poor Spartan men couldn't compete for the wealthy heiresses, and if a man couldn't secure a wife with enough land to support his household and pay his mess dues, his sons would risk losing their citizenship. This, the argument goes, is what led to Sparta's critical manpower shortage in its later years. The citizen body shrank not just because of war casualties, but because the internal economic system made it impossible for many families to stay in the elite class. So, was the system about breeding super soldiers, or was it about all and grab that ultimately hollowed out the state from within? The eugenics versus economics debate is central to understanding Sparta's decline. You have made your calculations. You have weighed her physical attributes against her family's property. You have balanced the needs of the state with your own personal ambition. You have chosen a woman who is a sound investment. The arrangements have been made in secret. The stage is now set for one of the strangest wedding nights in history. There is no public ceremony. No exchange of vows in front of family and friends. No feast, no music, no celebration. Your wedding day is a covert operation. The entire event is designed to be as unceremonial and as anti-romantic as possible. A stark reflection of Sparta's view on marriage as a functional duty, not a romantic union. On the appointed night, your bride is prepared, not by being adorned in beautiful white robes and jewelry, but by being systematically stripped of her feminine identity. The ritual is stark and bizarre. An older woman, a sort of matron of honor, called the nymphokomos, takes charge. First, she takes a razor and shaves your bride's head completely bald. Then, she dresses her not in a wedding gown, but in a man's cloak and sandals. Finally, she leaves your bride alone in a darkened, windowless room, lying on a simple pallet on the floor. She is now ready. This ritual is one of the most famous and peculiar aspects of Spartan life. It's a powerful symbolic act. The shaving of the head and the male clothing serve to defeminize her, to blur the lines between genders. For this one night, she is made to resemble one of the boys from your barracks. The act is meant to make the transition from the all-male world of the agoge to a relationship with a woman less jarring for you. You are not meeting a soft, perfumed, traditionally feminine creature. You are meeting someone who, in the dark, might almost seem like a familiar comrade. It's a psychological bridge designed to ease a young man who has spent his entire life in a homosocial environment into a heterosexual relationship. Now it's your turn. You are at your communal mess, eating the usual black broth with your comrades. You must act completely normal. No one acknowledges that this is your wedding night. You share the same dark jokes, the same laconic conversation. When the meal is over, you must slip away unnoticed. This is part of the test. You must be sober, stealthy, and discreet. You make your way through the dark streets of Sparta to the house where your bride is waiting. You enter the dark room. There she is, a shadowy figure in men's clothing, her head bare. There are no words of love, no tender greetings. You capture her. This is the culmination of the marriage by abduction ritual. You spend a short time with her, consummating the marriage. The entire encounter is brief, furtive, and functional. And then, before the sun rises, you must leave. You must sneak back to the barracks and be in your place next to your comrades when morning comes. You must act as if nothing has happened. No one should know where you were or what you did. This brings us to a fascinating and slightly strange detail. What was the purpose of all this secrecy beyond easing the groom's transition? The Spartans believed this clandestine nature of the relationship actually made it stronger and more potent. Plutarch explains their reasoning by making the meetings between husband and wife rare, brief, and fraught with the risk of being discovered. It would keep their desire for each other fresh and intense. Familiarity, in their view, bred contempt, or at least a boring complacency. They believed that this system of starving the relationship would lead to more vigorous and passionate encounters, which in turn would produce stronger and healthier children. It was a bizarre form of reverse psychology applied to procreation. Naturally, historians debate the true meaning and psychological impact of this ritual. Was it really an effective psychological tool? Was it a deeply traumatic and dehumanizing experience, especially for the woman? She is isolated, stripped of her identity, and then subjected to a brief, impersonal encounter in the dark with a man who is effectively a stranger. It seems designed to create emotional distance, not intimacy. Some scholars argue that we are misinterpreting the ritual through our modern lens of romance. They suggest that for a Spartan woman, who was raised to be tough and pragmatic, this might not have been as traumatic as it sounds to us. It was simply the way things were done, a rite of passage into adulthood that she had been prepared for. Her honor came not from a romantic wedding, but from becoming the wife of a Spartan warrior and a mother of future citizens. Others argue that no amount of cultural conditioning can erase the basic human need for connection, and that this ritual was inherently alienating. It set the tone for a marriage based not on companionship, but on duty and stealth. The debate centers on the unknowable emotional reality of the people involved. Was it a pragmatic ritual for a pragmatic people, or a cold, empty act that laid the foundation for a lifetime of emotional distance? Your part in the ritual is over. You are back in the barracks before dawn. You are now a married man, but your life has not changed. You are still a soldier, living and eating with your comrades. You are a husband, but only in secret, for a few stolen hours in the dead of night. You are now a husband, but the title feels abstract. Your daily life is identical to how it was before your secret wedding. You wake up in the barracks, you train with your unit, you eat your meals in the Spartan with the same group of men. You are a married bachelor. This arrangement will continue until you are 30 years old. 4 years, your marriage will exist only in the shadows. Your relationship with your wife is a series of clandestine meetings. You must continue to sneak out of the barracks at night, under the cover of darkness, to visit her at her family's home. Each visit is a risk. Being caught would bring shame and ridicule, not for the act itself, but for your lack of stealth. It's a continuation of the game of honorable theft you played as a boy. Only now the prize is a few precious hours with your wife. This system, where men lived in barracks and only visited their wives secretly, is a core historical fact about Spartan society for men under 30. It was designed to ensure that a man's primary loyalty remained with his military unit, not his new family. The state and the brotherhood of soldiers were his life. His wife and the home were a peripheral, nocturnal duty. The goal was to prevent domesticity from making the warriors soft, A comfortable home life was seen as a threat to military readiness. Imagine the strange dynamic this creates. You barely know the woman you are married to. Your time together is short, furtive, and focused almost exclusively on the act of procreation. There is little time for conversation, for building companionship, for forging the kind of intimate bond that we consider the foundation of a marriage. You might not even see your wife's face clearly in daylight for months, or even years after your wedding. Plutarch famously states that some Spartan men had children with their wives before they had ever seen them in the daylight. This leads to a specific, and rather poignant, detail of this arrangement. How did you communicate or arrange these secret meetings? There were no cell phones to send a quick "you up" text. The logistics must have been complex. It likely relied on a network of trusted intermediaries, perhaps the same nymphocomawes who prepared your bride for the wedding night, or sympathetic female relatives. A quiet word passed during the day, a subtle signal. These would have been the methods used to coordinate your nocturnal visits. It adds another layer of intrigue and complexity to this already strange relationship. The whole affair had the conspiratorial feel of a spy thriller, not a marriage. But this brings us to a major point of historical debate. What was the real life, human experience of these marriages? Did this system, as Plutarch claimed, genuinely keep passion alive and lead to more vigorous children, or did it create a society of emotionally stunted men and women, strangers bound together by duty alone? Many historians are skeptical of the official Spartan justification. They argue that the system was designed to create profound emotional distance. By keeping husband and wife separate, it ensured that the man's strongest emotional ties were to his male comrades, in the mess and the phalanx. This was the bond that mattered for military cohesion. A man's love for his wife was a potential liability, a distraction. The marriage was a cold, functional necessity, and the system was designed to keep it that way. In this view, Spartan marriages were largely loveless, a far cry from the companion aid ideals that were beginning to emerge in other parts of the Greek world like Athens. On the other hand, some scholars propose a more romantic, if speculative, interpretation. Could this enforced separation have had the opposite effect? Could the stolen moments, the risk, the secrecy have actually intensified the bond between a husband and wife? Forbidden fruit is often the sweetest. Perhaps these brief, clandestine meetings were charged with an intensity and passion that a more conventional, domestic marriage lacked. It's possible that some couples thrived on this drama, their connection deepened by the shared conspiracy of their relationship. We have no Spartan love letters or diaries to tell us. We can only speculate on the silent, emotional landscape of these nocturnal unions. Were they cold and dutiful? Or were they charged with a secret passion? The evidence allows for both interpretations. For you, it is simply your reality. Night after night, you weigh the risk versus the reward. You slip out of the barracks, a shadow moving through the sleeping city. You spend a few hours in a world that feels separate from your real life, a world of darkness and duty. And then you return, back to the light, back to the only true family you've ever known, the men you will fight and die with. Your wife remains a secret, a ghost in your life, a partner you know only by touch in the dark. You are a husband and potentially by now, a father. Yet, the concept of home and family as we understand it simply does not exist for you. Your home is the barracks. Your family is your SYS city, and the small, sparse house where your wife and child live is a place you visit, a duty you attend to, not a sanctuary you return to at the end of the day. If you have a child, the experience of fatherhood is profoundly alien to our modern sensibilities. You may have been notified of the birth by an intermediary. If it was a boy, you would have performed your civic duty of presenting him to the elders for inspection at the lèche, just as your father did with you. You would have felt a sense of pride and relief if he passed, a grim acceptance if he failed. But you are not involved in his daily life. You do not see his first steps, hear his first words, or comfort him when he cries. That is the mother's job, and soon it will be the state's. You are a biological father and a legal guardian, but you are not a dad. Your connection to your child is one of lineage and duty, not daily intimacy. This detachment from domestic life is a fundamental, well-documented aspect of the Spartan system for men under 30th. Your life is governed by the rhythms of military training, not family routines. The emotional bonds that a man in another city-state might form with his wife and children are, in your case, actively discouraged and structurally impossible to form. Your loyalty must remain undivided. You belong to Sparta first, last, and always. This leads to a peculiar and telling detail about Spartan social life. The concept of fatherhood was, in some ways, a communal idea. While you were the legal father of your biological children, all the older, full citizen men of Sparta had a kind of collective responsibility for all the boys, and the agoge Xenophon notes that any Spartan man could discipline any Spartan boy for an infraction, and it was considered an honor for a boy to be corrected by a respected elder. If a boy complained to his father about being disciplined by another man, the father would be shamed if he didn't discipline his son again for questioning the authority of an elder. In a sense, every man was a father figure to every boy. This system diluted the unique bond between a biological father and son, replacing it with a broader, collective sense of patriarchal authority. Your son is not just your son, he is a future soldier, and every citizen has a stake in his proper upbringing. But this complete separation of a man's life from his household raises a major historical question, one that scholars are still trying to fully unpack. What did this do to the concept of the oikos, the household, which was the absolute bedrock of society in every other Greek city-state in Athens? The oikos, the family, its property, and its home was the primary unit of social, economic, and political life. A man's identity was tied to his household. Sparta seems to have systematically dismantled this by forcing men to live in barracks and eat in messes. The state effectively broke the power of the private household and transferred all that loyalty and focus to public, state-controlled institutions. Was this a total revolution, as it appears on the surface, or was the oikos still important, just in a different way? Some historians argue that the household, managed entirely by the woman, remained a powerful economic engine. It was the oikos that produced the wealth from the kale arrows that allowed the man to maintain his citizenship. While the man's social and political life was public, his economic survival was still tied to this private sphere he barely inhabited. It created a strange schism. A man's public status was entirely dependent on a domestic world he was excluded from. Other historians suggest that we might be overstating the separation. Perhaps after the initial, highly secretive phase of marriage, the rules became more relaxed. Maybe visits became more frequent and open as a man got closer to 30. The sources are focused on the most extreme and bizarre aspects of the system and might not be giving us a full picture of the day-to-day reality. The debate continues: did Sparta successfully destroy the private family unit in favor of the state? Or did the family simply adapt, operating in a different, less visible way with the woman at its center? For you, the abstract debates mean little. Your life is a stark division of two worlds. The world of light is the barracks, the training field, the mess hall. It is a world of men, of discipline, of camaraderie, of a clear and unwavering purpose. The world of darkness is the occasional, furtive visit to a house that is not your home, to a woman you barely know, to a child who is a stranger. You are living a double life, but it is a lopsided one. 99% of your existence belongs to the state. The remaining 1% is a secret you keep in the night. During your rare, clandestine visits, you begin to piece together a picture of your wife. She is not the demure, sheltered creature you might find in an Athenian household. She is a Spartan woman, and that makes her a formidable figure in her own right. While you have been living a life of communal austerity, she has been the master of a complex and demanding domain. You slowly realize that your wife is not just a mother, she is a manager. The kale arrows the plot of land that provides the food for your contribution to the mess hall and supports your family is her responsibility. She oversees the helot workforce, ensuring the fields are planted, the crops are harvested, and the quotas are met. She manages the household finances, the food stores, and the production of textiles. While you have been honing your skills as a warrior, she has been honing her skills as a savvy and powerful estate manager. This level of female autonomy and economic power was unheard of in the rest of the Greek world and is a cornerstone of what made Sparta so unique. Her days are not spent in quiet domesticity. Like you, she received a state-sponsored education. She can read and write. She is physically fit, continuing to exercise with other women to maintain her health and strength. She is known for her confidence and her sharp, laconic wit, just like the men. There's a famous story of Gorgo, the wife of King Leonidas. When a woman from another land asked her, "Why are you Spartan women the only ones who can rule men?" Gorgo supposedly replied, "Because we are also the only ones who give birth to men." This kind of bold, assertive retort was characteristic of Spartan women. They were not expected to be silent or submissive. This brings us to a strange and specific detail about your wife's life: her involvement in religious festivals. While men's lives were dominated by military and civic duties, women's lives were rich with religious participation. They had their own choruses, their own festivals, and their own rituals that were central to the spiritual life of the state. For example, at the Hyacinthia, a major festival for the god Apollo, it was the women who took center stage on certain days, riding in ornate wicker chariots, competing in choral performances, and weaving sacred garments for the god's statue. These roles gave them a public platform, a source of honor, and a sphere of influence completely separate from the men's world. Your wife wasn't just managing a farm, she was a key player in maintaining the state's relationship with the gods. However, this image of the empowered, liberated Spartan woman is the subject of a fierce and ongoing historical debate. Was the Spartan woman truly free, or was her freedom just another form of service to the state? The traditional, almost romantic view is that Spartan women were the most liberated in the ancient world. They were educated, fit, economically powerful, and sexually autonomous. They were partners in the Great Spartan Project, but many contemporary historians, particularly feminist scholars, offer a much more critical perspective. They argue that every aspect of a Spartan woman's life was just as controlled and directed by the state as a man's. She was educated so that she could be a competent manager of the estate that freed up her husband for war. She was made to exercise so that she could produce strong babies for the army. Her economic power was a byproduct of a military system that required absent husbands. Her freedom was not for her own self-fulfillment, it was purely functional, designed to uphold the militaristic state. In this view, she wasn't liberated, she was just a different kind of cog in the same brutal machine, a womb for the state. Her body, her health, and her managerial skills were all state resources. The debate is complex. To call her liberated might be an anachronism, imposing modern values on an ancient society. But to call her purely a to love the state might be to deny her agency and the genuine power she wielded within her society. The truth is likely that she was both a powerful and autonomous figure within her sphere, but a figure whose power and autonomy were ultimately harnessed for the goals of the state. As you get to know your wife in these fleeting encounters, you might feel a sense of respect, perhaps even intimidation. She is not a passive partner in your life. She is the powerful, efficient manager of the economic engine that allows you to be a warrior. She is a stranger, but a competent and formidable one. Your relationship is a partnership of two specialists, each trained by the state for a specific, vital role. You are the sword and shield, she is the foundation and the treasury. You serve the same single, all-powerful master Sparta. The ultimate goal of your clandestine marriage, the key performance indicator set by the state, is the production of a healthy male heir. This is your most important joint project. Everything the eugenic selection, the strange wedding ritual, the furtive meetings has been leading to this. Your personal legacy and your wife's honor are both tied to this biological outcome. When your wife becomes pregnant, it is a moment of quiet, anxious anticipation. The health and fitness regimens that both of you have followed your entire lives are now put to the test. The state has invested heavily in both of you as prime genetic stock, and now it expects a return on that investment. If a daughter is born, she is, of course, welcomed. Daughters are essential. They are the future mothers of future warriors, the future managers of the Kale Arroyant, the future owners of Sparta's land. A daughter is a valuable asset, but it is not the ultimate prize. The highest honor, the true fulfillment of your marital duty, is to produce a son. When a son is born, a wave of relief and pride washes over your small, disconnected family unit. Your wife has proven her worth. You have fulfilled your primary obligation. The lineage will continue. You have supplied a new recruit for the agoge, a future link in the phalanx. But your role, as we know, is minimal. After presenting him to the elders for his quality control check, your son's life is now in the hands of his mother, and soon the state. This focus on procreation leads to a very practical and sentimental approach to marital problems. What if a marriage was not producing children in other Greek cities? This would be a private tragedy. In Sparta, it was a public policy problem. If a couple was childless, the state had solutions. This is where we encounter the well-documented, yet still shocking, practice of wife sharing. If you weren't able to produce children with your wife, especially if she was a desirable heiress, it was considered acceptable for you to invite another man, perhaps someone younger, stronger, or with a proven track record of fathering healthy sons, to impregnate her on your behalf. The resulting child would be considered your legal heir, inheriting your name and property. This was not seen as adultery. It was a logical, pragmatic solution to a dynastic and demographic problem. The goal was to ensure the woman's genetic and material assets were put to good use for the state and the family line. This brings us to an even stranger, more specific permutation of this practice. It wasn't just for childless couples. A respected older man who already had his required heirs but who had a young, healthy wife might be approached by a younger, unmarried man who admired her. The younger man could ask for permission to borrow his wife to produce a noble child for himself. The older husband, seeing it as his civic duty to allow his wife's excellent genetic material to benefit the state, might agree. This was a transaction between men in which the woman was the valuable asset being loaned out. It strips away all pretense of romance or emotional connection and reveals the core of the Spartan view of marriage. It was a public trust, not a private relationship. The woman's womb was, in a very real sense, a state resource. Naturally, the true nature and frequency of this wife-sharing practice is a hot topic of historical debate. Our main sources for this are Xenophon and Plutarch, both of whom present it as a rational, high-minded system designed for eugenic perfection. They paint a picture of selfless Spartan men putting the state's needs above their own personal jealousy. But was it really that clean and logical? Many historians are skeptical. They question how this system actually felt for the people involved. What about the wife's perspective? Did she have any say in which man she was loaned to? The sources, written by men, are silent on this. What about the husband's feelings? Can we really believe that Spartan men were devoid of the jealousy and possessiveness that seem to be such common human emotions? It seems more likely that this was a source of significant social tension, rivalry, and conflict that our idealistic sources simply gloss over. Furthermore, some scholars argue that this practice was probably not a common, everyday occurrence, but rather something that happened more within the upper echelons of Spartan society, particularly in the two royal families, where dynastic succession was a matter of state security. The story of King Anaxandridas II, who was pressured by the Horse to take a second wife because his first was barren, is a famous example. He was reluctant, but the state's need for an heir overrode his personal feelings. The debate centers on whether this was a widespread social norm or a more limited practice for the elite, later sensationalized by outside observers. For you, the pressure is immense. Your marriage is not a private affair. It has one clear, publicly mandated goal. You and your wife are a team, tasked with a critical mission. Failure is not an option. And if you do fail, the state has a list of approved, if unsettling, solutions. The idea of sharing your wife for the good of the state is a logical extension of the Spartan ethos. But it's one that feels profoundly alien. You have been trained your entire life to see yourself not as an individual, but as a part of a collective. Your body, your time, your loyalty, they all belong to Sparta. It follows, in a grimly logical way, that your marriage and your wife's procreative abilities are also, to some extent, communal property. Let's imagine the scenario. You are a respected warrior, but perhaps you are getting older. You have fulfilled your duty, you have heirs. Your wife is still young and strong, from excellent stock. A younger man, a promising warrior who perhaps lacks a wife of his own, or whose wife is barren, approaches you. He doesn't do it in a back alley. It's a formal request. He wishes to borrow your wife to plant a seed in her fertile field, so that he too can have a child worthy of Sparta. According to the idealized sources, your correct response, as a good Spartan, is to feel a sense of pride. You should be honored that another man recognizes the quality of your stock. Your wife's ability to produce strong children is a testament to your own good judgment in choosing her. To refuse out of jealousy or possessiveness would be small-minded, a betrayal of the communal spirit. It would be prioritizing your personal feelings over the needs of the state, which is the greatest sin in the Spartan moral universe. So you agree. You have loaned your wife. The resulting child will belong to the other man, but it will be a product of your household, a credit to your wife's strength and your own civic-mindedness. This practice is one of the most striking examples of how Sparta subordinated private life to public policy. It treats women, marriage, and reproduction as instruments of statecraft. The emotional bonds, the exclusivity, and the jealousy that we consider integral to marriage are viewed as liabilities, obstacles to the efficient production of high-quality citizens. Now, for a very specific, and quite famous, historical example of this principle in action. The story concerns a man named Alcibiades, a flamboyant and controversial Athenian general, who was exiled from Athens and sought refuge in Sparta. While there, he had an affair with the wife of the Spartan king, Agoge. This was not the sanctioned, open wife sharing we've been discussing. This was genuine, secretive adultery. When a son, Eunuchs, was born, it was widely rumored that Alcibiades was the real father. This rumor was so powerful that it ultimately led to Eunuchs being denied the throne. The key detail here is what Alcibiades supposedly said about the affair. He bragged that he had not done it merely for pleasure, but because he wanted his own descendants to one day rule over the Spartans. This story, whether true or just a piece of propaganda, perfectly illustrates the Spartan mindset from an outsider's perspective. Alcibiades framed his personal transgression in purely Spartan terms. He was engaging in a eugenic project. He was trying to insert his own superior Athenian seed into the Spartan royal line. The scandal wasn't just about infidelity. It was about a foreigner hijacking their state-controlled breeding program for his own dynastic ambitions. This brings us to the inevitable historical debate. Did this system of wife sharing actually happen, as our sources describe it? If so, how did it affect the women involved? Our sources, Xenophon and Plutarch, are male writers who present the system from a male point of view. It's a transaction between a husband and another man. The woman is the object of the transaction. Her feelings, her desires, her consent, they are completely absent from the narrative. Feminist historians have rightly pointed this out as a massive hole in our understanding. Was the woman a willing participant, proud to do her duty for the state, or was she a powerless pawn, her body used and exchanged by men to forge alliances, settle debts, or pursue eugenic goals. It's very difficult to believe that this process was free of coercion or emotional distress. To be loaned out like a prize mare, even for the good of the state, is a deeply dehumanizing concept. Some scholars argue that we should not underestimate the agency of Spartan women. Given their education, confidence, and relative autonomy, it's possible that they had more influence in these arrangements than the male-centric sources let on. Perhaps a woman could subtly encourage or discourage a potential suitor. Maybe she could influence her husband's decision. But we have no direct evidence. We are left with a system that, on its face, treats women as breeding stock. Whether this was the complete reality, or if there was a hidden world of female agency and resistance, remains one of the great unanswered questions about Spartan society. You look at your wife, the manager of your estate, the mother of your children. You see her not just as your partner, but as a valuable asset, a resource that the state has a vested interest in. The line between your private life and your public duty has been completely erased. Even the most intimate aspects of your marriage are subject to the cold, pragmatic calculus of the Spartan state. The years roll on. You have survived battles, fulfilled your marital duties, and paid your mess dues. And then, another significant birthday arrives, your 30th. This is the moment you have been waiting for your entire adult life. On this day, you finally graduate from being a full-time resident of the barracks. You are released from your communal living quarters and are, for the first time, allowed to live at home with your wife and family. This transition marks your entry into full and complete citizenship. You are no longer just a soldier in training or on active duty. You are now a senior man, a true homo ios and equal. You can now participate more fully in the political life of the state. You are eligible to attend the assembly, the appella, where all male citizens over 30 vote on proposals put forward by the elders and the kings. You don't get to debate, that's for the elites, but you can vote, usually by shouting or clashing your weapons. Your voice, literally, now matters. The move home is a profound shift in your daily reality. After 23 years of living exclusively with men, you are now entering a domestic world. You wake up in a house, not a barracks. You see your wife and children in the daylight. For the first time, you can have something resembling a normal family life. You still take your main meal, the evening dinner, at your SYS city, and that is a non-negotiable duty that continues until you are 60. The mess hall remains the center of your social and political world. But for the rest of the day, you are a master in your own home. This brings us to a small, but revealing detail about your new life. What do you actually do all day? You are forbidden by law from practicing any trade or craft. You are certainly not going to farm your own land, that's what the helots are for. Your entire life has been dedicated to military training. So, you continue to train. Your days are spent in the gymnasium, exercising, wrestling, and honing your combat skills. You also spend a great deal of time hunting, which was considered the next best thing to warfare. A successful hunt was a display of martial virtue. Essentially, your life is a constant state of readiness, a perpetual preparation for the next campaign. You are a member of a permanent warrior class, with an enormous amount of leisure time, all of it dedicated to the art of war. But this new stage of life, this supposed pinnacle of Spartan manhood, is where a critical historical debate comes into focus. What was the real political power of an ordinary Spartan citizen? Like you, the traditional image is of a state where all equals had a genuine say. But how true was this? You can vote in the assembly, but you can't propose laws, you can't amend them, and you can't even debate them. You are given a simple yes or no choice on matters decided by the tiny elite group of elders, the jurasai, and the two kings. Furthermore, the real power in Sparta was increasingly concentrated in the hands of the 5 EP whores. These were magistrates elected for a single year, and they held immense power over every aspect of Spartan life. They could challenge the kings, arrest citizens, and control foreign policy. Some historians argue that Sparta was not the stable, mixed constitution it was praised for, but was, in fact, a deeply conservative and oppressive oligarchy run by a handful of powerful men. The assembly of citizens might have just been a rubber stamp, a way to give the illusion of popular consent to decisions that had already been made by the elite. The equality of the homo ioi might have been an ideology, not a political reality. You were equal in your duty to serve and die, but perhaps not so equal when it came to wielding actual power. So you settle into your new life. You are a husband, a father, a homeowner, and a voter. You are at the peak of your status. You oversee your estate, though your wife still does the day-to-day management. You watch your son as he enters the agoge, the same brutal system that shaped you. You see him on the training grounds and feel a sense of pride, knowing he is on the same path. You sit in the mess hall in the evenings, no longer a junior member to be quizzed, but a veteran whose stories are listened to. You have reached the Spartan version of success. You have survived the system and have become one of its pillars. But your life is built on a foundation that is invisible to you in your daily routine, a foundation of silent, resentful labor. You are now a master of your own household, a respected warrior, a full citizen. Your life by Spartan standards is one of privilege and honor. You have a guaranteed plot of land, a source of food and wealth, and an abundance of leisure time to dedicate to what you deem most important: hunting and military training. But this entire edifice, this comfortable life you lead, rests on a dark and brutal foundation. It rests on the backs of the helots. The helots are everywhere and nowhere. They are the silent majority of the population in Laconia and Messenia. They work your KO areas assigned to you by the state. They sow the barley, tend the olive groves, and press the grapes for your wine. They are the ones who produce the monthly quota of goods that you are required to contribute to your SYS city, and your ability to be a full-time soldier. Your very citizenship is entirely dependent on their forced labor. They are not your personal slaves. You cannot sell them. They belong to the state and are bound to the land they work. They are a subjugated, state-owned population. Your relationship with the helots who work your land is one of pure dominance. You are their master, but there is no kindness or paternalism in this relationship. There is only fear and suspicion. The Spartans lived in a constant state of low-grade paranoia, acutely aware that they were a tiny ruling class sitting on top of a volcano of potential rebellion. The helots outnumbered the Spartan citizens by a huge margin. Some ancient estimates suggest a ratio of 7-1, or even higher. This demographic imbalance was the defining, terrifying fact of Spartan existence. This fear led to a system of institutionalized humiliation and terror designed to keep the helots broken and subordinate. This is a core and disturbing historical fact. Beyond the shadowy work of the cryptia, there were everyday rituals of degradation. Plutarch describes how Spartans would force helots to drink in mixed wine until they were all down drunk, and then parade them through the public messes. The purpose was to show the Spartan youth what drunkenness looked like, a living spectacle of shameful excess. It was a lesson in what not to be, using a human being as a negative example. They were also forced to wear humiliating clothing, like a leather cap and animal skins, to visually mark them as inferior. They were, in essence, a permanent underclass whose debasement was a tool for educating Spartan children. Now for a specific, and particularly cruel, detail of this system. Not only were the helots forced to work, they were also sometimes forced to fight. In times of war, when Sparta needed more manpower, they would conscript helots to serve as light infantry or skirmishers, supporting the main hoplite phalanx. They would fight for their masters, for the state that enslaved them. But even here, Spartan paranoia was ever present. Herodotus tells a chilling story after the Battle of Plataea, where thousands of helots had served. The Spartans, fearing that these now armed and military experienced helots might get ideas of rebellion, supposedly concocted a plan. They announced that they would grant freedom to the bravest of the Helot soldiers. About 2,000 of the most courageous and ambitious Helots stepped forward, believing they had earned their liberty. They worked round, with garlands unparaded around the temples, and then they disappeared. They were secretly executed by the Spartan authorities, who had cleverly identified and eliminated the most likely future leaders of a revolt. This story leads to a crucial historical debate: was the Spartan system's reliance on Helot labor its greatest strength, or its fatal weakness? The conventional argument is that it was both. It was a strength because it freed up the entire male citizen body to become a professional, full-time army, giving Sparta an unmatched military advantage for centuries. No other Greek state could field an army of such skill and discipline because their citizens had to be farmers and craftsmen. However, many historians now argue that it was ultimately Sparta's Achilles' heel. The constant, gnawing fear of a Helot uprising paralyzed Spartan foreign policy. They were always reluctant to send their army too far from home or for too long, in case the Helots rebelled while the army was away. This chain around the leg, as some scholars have called it, made them a conservative and inward-looking power. The need to control the Helots was the justification for the entire brutal agoge system. It locked Sparta into a rigid, militaristic path and prevented any possibility of social or political evolution. They couldn't reform their state because any change might weaken their grip on the Helots. Their system of oppression, designed to guarantee their security, ultimately led to their stagnation and downfall. You look out over your land, the source of your wealth. You see the figures toiling in the fields, the silent partners in your success. You see them not as people, but as a resource to be managed and a threat to be controlled. Your entire identity as a proud, free Spartan warrior is built upon their subjugation. You are a master, but you are also a prisoner of the very system that makes you so. Your world is one of land, honor, and iron. Your understanding of wealth is fundamentally different from that of a merchant in Corinth or a potter in Athens. For you, true wealth is not about accumulating gold and silver. In fact, the possession of gold and silver coins is illegal for private citizens. Your life is defined by a state-enforced austerity that shapes your entire view of economics. The legendary lawgiver Lycurgus, to whom the Spartans attributed their entire way of life, was said to have banned all gold and silver currency. Instead, he introduced a bizarre, deliberately impractical form of money: massive iron rods, or spezzobiello, which had been made brittle and useless by being quenched in a vinegar bath. The idea was to make wealth physically difficult to accumulate, store, and transport. You couldn't hide a fortune of iron rods under your mattress, nor could you easily use them to bribe officials or pay for foreign luxuries. This forced everyone, in theory, to live a simple life, free from the corrupting influence of money. This state-mandated rejection of traditional currency is a famous hallmark of Spartan society. Your wealth, therefore, is measured in real, tangible assets. Your primary asset is your kale arrows, your allotment of public land. This land, and the Helots who work it, is the true source of your power. It provides the food that pays your mess dues, which in turn secures your citizenship. To lose your kale arrows is to lose everything. So, wealth for you is about land ownership. The more plots of land your family controls, the more secure and powerful you are. Beyond land, wealth is about status and honor. It's the respect you command in your SYS citizen. It's the reputation you have as a warrior. It's the success of your sons in the agoge. These are the currencies that truly matter in your world. You don't aspire to a bigger house or fancier clothes. You aspire to a more heroic death and a more enduring legacy. This brings us to a specific and slightly hypocritical detail about Spartan wealth. While you, an ordinary citizen, were forbidden from owning gold, the Spartan state was not. Over the centuries, especially during the height of its power in the Peloponnesian War and its aftermath, the Spartan state accumulated vast reserves of gold and silver. mostly from tribute paid by other Greek cities and plunder from its old enemy Persia. This created the strange paradox of society that preached austerity at home was becoming a major financial power abroad. The leaders who enforced the ban on personal wealth were themselves managing a massive state fortune. This influx of foreign gold would eventually begin to corrode the system from within, as high-ranking Spartans found ways to access it, leading to bribery and corruption on a scale that would have horrified their ancestors. This hypocrisy is at the heart of a major historical debate. Was the Spartan ideal of austerity a genuine, lived reality, or was it a carefully constructed myth, a piece of propaganda that masked a more complex and unequal economic system? The traditional view, promoted by admirers like Xenophon, is that Sparta was, for a long time, a genuinely ascetic society where the laws against luxury were strictly enforced. They were a people who truly despised wealth and lived a hard, simple life by choice. However, more critical historians argue that this is a naive oversimplification. They contend that from a very early stage, there were significant wealth disparities in Sparta. The law against gold and silver may have been on the books, but it was likely circumvented. Rich Spartans could still acquire wealth through land, through inheritance from heiresses, and perhaps through illicit dealings in foreign currency. They argue that the myth of Spartan equality was a powerful ideological tool used by the elite to keep the poorer citizens in line, making them feel like part of a unified brotherhood, while the rich got richer. The fact that the system eventually collapsed due to wealth inequality and a shrinking citizen body suggests that the ideal of austerity was, in the long run, a failure. The question of whether Sparta was a society of true equals or a deeply unequal society, hiding behind a mask of simplicity, is fundamental to understanding its history. You look around your simple home. Your furniture is functional, made of plain wood. Your meals, outside of the mess hall, are basic. You wear the same crimson cloak as every other citizen. On the surface, you are living the austere ideal. You are a homo, ios and equal. But you are keenly aware of the status of your neighbors. You know who married a wealthy heiress. You know who married a wealthy heiress. You know who struggles to make their monthly contribution to the mess. The iron currency may be gone, but the currency of land and lineage is everywhere. A silent, powerful force shaping the destinies of everyone around you. You are now over 60. Your hair, once long and proudly worn, is now gray. Your body, though still tough, aches with the memory of 1,000 battles, real and simulated. Your mandatory military service is over. You no longer have to march out with the army when the call comes. You have survived to an age that many of your comrades in the agoge never reached. You have officially become an elder, a Geran elder. This is the final stage of a Spartan man's life, and for a select few, it holds the ultimate honor. You are now eligible for election to the Geras, the Council of Elders. This is the most powerful body in the Spartan state. It consists of 28 men, all over the age of 60, plus the 2 kings. Once elected, you serve for life. The Geras acts as the Supreme Court, with the power to try capital cases, including those against the kings. It is the Geras that prepares and debates all the legislation that is then presented to the assembly for a simple up or down vote. To be one of these 28 men is to be at the absolute pinnacle of Spartan society. The election process for the Geras is, like so many things in Sparta, a peculiar and theatrical affair. Aristotle, who was a sharp critic of the Spartan constitution, described it with a tone of disbelief. The candidates, the most respected and virtuous old men of the city, are presented one by one to the assembly. They walk in silence through the gathered crowd of citizens. The people, in turn, show their support for each candidate by shouting. The louder the shout, the more popular the candidate. But here's the strange part. The judges of this election are hidden away in a nearby building with a writing tablet. They cannot see the candidates, so they do not know who is being presented at any given time. Their job is simply to listen to the volume of the shouting. They mark down which candidate received the loudest and most sustained applause. The men who win the shouting contest are declared the new members of the Gerus. Aristotle called this method childish, a bizarrely primitive way to select the highest officials of the state. It was, in essence, a popularity contest decided by applause meter. Whether you are elected to this high council or simply retire to a life of respect and ease, your purpose in society has one final, crucial role. You are now the living embodiment of Spartan virtue, a repository of its history and its values. Your job is to watch the next generation. You spend your days at the gymnasia and the training grounds, observing the boys and young men. You are the one who now asks the sharp, testing questions at the public messes. You are the one who provides the praise that builds a young boy's honor and the criticism that hardens his resolve. You have become one of the old men who inspected you on the day you were born. The circle is now complete. But what is the end you hope? For what is the ideal death for a man who has lived such a life? It is not to die peacefully in your bed, surrounded by family. The highest honor, the only end truly worthy of a Spartan, is to die in battle for the state. This is the ultimate fulfillment of your purpose. A man who died in battle was given the special privilege of having his name inscribed on his tombstone. He was a hero, his memory secured. Most other Spartans, including women who did not die in childbirth, were buried in unmarked graves, their individual identities subsumed into the collective. Only two kinds of people were worthy of a named grave: the man who died for Sparta and the woman who died giving birth to a Spartan. Both were seen as having died in service to the state. This leads to a final poignant debate among historians. Did the Spartans truly not fear death, as their mythology suggests, or was their entire, brutal system of training a desperate, lifelong attempt to manage that fear? The ideal of the fearless warrior, calmly combing his hair before a battle he knows he will lose, is a powerful one. But is it humanly possible? Some scholars argue that yes, the Spartan system was so effective at indoctrination that it largely succeeded in overriding the individual's survival instinct with a collective desire for honor. They truly came to believe that a glorious death was preferable to a long, unremarkable life. Others take a more psychological view. They argue that the system didn't eliminate fear, but rather sublimated it. The fear of death was replaced by a much greater, more immediate fear of shame, of cowardice, of being a rip's asp as a shield dropper. You didn't run from the enemy because you were more terrified of what your comrades would think of you if you did. The system worked not by making men fearless, but by making them more afraid of dishonor than of dying. You sit and watch the sun set over the Tagetos Mountains, the same mountains where imperfect infants were once supposedly left to die. Your life has been a long, straight, and unforgiving road. You were born for the state, raised by the state, and you lived every moment of your life in its service. You have known hardship, discipline, and the strange, fierce love of comrades. You have not known comfort, or peace, or freedom in the way other Greeks might understand it. You are a product of the most successful and terrifying social experiment in the ancient world. You are a Spartan, and you are ready for your end, hoping only that it will be a good one, a death that gives final meaning to a life of sacrifice. The world of ancient Sparta begins to fade now, its sharp, iron edges softening as you drift deeper. The sounds of the barracks, the sting of the whip, the weight of the shield, they all dissolve into the quiet hum of the night around you. You are no longer on the training grounds or in the phalanx. You are floating in that gentle space between wake of signals and dream. The harsh red of the Spartan cloak bleeds into a warmer, softer color. The rigid lines of the city blur into the flowing, unpredictable landscapes of your own mind. The questions and the hardships of that life are no longer yours to answer. The pressure to be strong, to be worthy, it lifts, like a heavy cloak falling from your shoulders. There are no more tests to pass, no more dues to be paid. The voices of the elders grow faint, replaced by the steady, quiet rhythm of your own breathing. Each breath is a soft wave, washing away the dust of history, leaving only a sense of calm. You can feel the day releasing its grip, the tension in your muscles easing as you sink a little deeper into comfort. The story is over. Your journey is done. Now there is only stillness. There is only the gentle pull of sleep, drawing you into a place of rest, a place of quiet restoration. Let go of the day. Let go of all the thoughts and worries. There is nothing left to do now but to rest, to sleep, to drift. The end of the article. Good night.